Well, here's someone who had very good lunches. I had a dad who worked as a farm advisor in the 70s. He would bring home crayfish all the time, and I would be heard to exclaim, "Not crayfish rolls again," in the lunch break. You don't like shrimp, David? Do you like crayfish?
No.
Oh.
I knew you were going to ask me too. My wife absolutely loves it, but no, I don't like crayfish.
Good heavens above. What can I ask you a personal question? Why?
Why don't I like crayfish?
Yeah.
I don't like the taste. I
think it would be easy to host David for dinner or lunch because there's so many things he just doesn't like.
Do you know? No. So in my defence, I'm a large guy. I will eat most things. You've just hit on a couple of things today that I don't. Shrimp, crayfish, and pea soup. Just rubbish. That's a terrible 3-course meal.
That's actually my ideal meal, Tabor.
Oh, no.
Crayfish, shrimp, pea soup, and a little side of sourdough bread, eh? What do you reckon?
Oh,
yeah.
There you go, David. He's inviting you over.
So, loving the panel today. Such sensible comments from your guests, Wallace. So there you go, to the both of you. Just on this note...
It's because we're so charismatic.
Maybe. A good story by RNZ's Hamish Cardwell today about the financial cost of Lime scooters. A new study in the New Zealand Medical Journal shows people can really be badly hurt on these scooters with injuries similar to those from a car crash. It looked at injury presentations at Auckland Hospital over a 4-month period from October last year to February this year. 21 people went to hospital with e-scooter related injuries in that time, needing surgery, which costs more than $360,000. And that doesn't count people treated at emergency departments or from private providers, which they estimate would at least match the amount spent on surgeries at Auckland Hospital. Since October, ACC spent nearly $2 million on Aucklanders hurt while riding the scooters, but Lime spokesperson Lauren Mentox said that more than 1 million rides happened while the study was being carried out. So the potential resulting in injury is actually, in context, small. Tabor, you a fan of e-scooters? Do you take them?
No, I don't. I'm not that cool. But look, I honed in on the paper and read that 29% of the participants were over 50. And this is going to make me sound like an ageist, but
males in suits is what it said.
Right. Okay. Well, like all toys, I think Lime scooters should also come with age ratings, but maybe a training manual. I don't know. Might be helpful.
So
another thing that boomers are ruining for everyone.
Oh, they'll come out now. Gosh. What about you, David? Do you ride do you partake in the e-scooters?
No, I have a fear that I'm going to fall off one and someone's going to be videoing on their mobile phone, and then it's fat guy falls off e-scooter, video goes viral. And it's not a rational fear, but it's a genuine fear of mine. So I've stayed. They look like fun though. Walking up the hill to the studio, actually, I had to get out of the way of 2 kids who they go like 25k an hour.
Incredible.
And that seems insane on a footpath. Like, we talk about accessibility, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Lime scooter common sense, David. The one good thing you've said this afternoon, and I completely agree with you. There you go.
I've said many good things, Wallace, many.
You've been fantastic. Thank you so much, Tabor Khan and David Cormack. Thank you very much for raising the bar on a panel Friday. Thanks to my producer, Neil Donovan, and see you all next week from 3:45. Checkpoint next.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, 914 cases and rising. Has the measles outbreak got away on health officials? A secondary school league championship is canned to avoid spreading the highly contagious disease. Another tournament organiser says he would ban unimmunised kids if he could. And the National Health Coordination Centre has fired up, along with vaccination pop-ups. A New Zealand resident is questioned over the mysterious deaths of 5 people in Fiji. And Christchurch's concrete slab cover-up. How much will it cost? And gorse or gold of the ocean? Is Seaweed the next business bonanza? Don't forget, you can catch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The government is activating a National Health Coordination Centre in response to the measles outbreak. There are 762 confirmed cases in Auckland, but only 64 elsewhere in the country. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
The Associate Health Minister, Julianne Genter, says despite an additional 57,000 MMR vaccines administered in the last 6 months, New Zealand has not escaped the measles outbreak occurring globally. She says the National Health Coordination Centre will coordinate the response to the outbreak in Auckland and monitor the rest of the country. The centre will work with Auckland's DHBs and Public Health Service and strengthen the response. Earlier this week, the government announced funding for another 5 vaccinator nurses to provide extra free services in Middlemore Hospital and outreach centres in South Auckland. The county's Manawatu DHB will also be training 25 nurses for a program covering 35 high schools. From Parliament, ko Charlie Drever, tēnei.
The New Zealand Secondary Schools Rugby League Championships, due to be held in South Auckland next week, have been cancelled because of the measles outbreak. New Zealand Rugby League's General Manager of Wellbeing, Nigel Vangana, says though it was sad to call off the champs, people were more important.
I'd say there'd be a lot of disappointed kids out there missing out on this opportunity, but unfortunately it was out of our hands and one that we sort of had to do for the people of the country, really. So we don't want teams travelling up from the South Island, potentially getting crook or one of them getting crook and taking it back down there, you know.
The Secondary Schools Rugby League Championship was one of 79 sports tournaments taking place around the country as part of Winter Tournament Week. A Fijian family of 5 who died in mysterious circumstances last weekend will be buried tomorrow, the day they were to be celebrating the birthdays of 2 of the children. Fijian authorities are currently interviewing 2 New Zealand residents, a man and a woman, in relation to the deaths of a Fijian couple, their daughter and her 2 daughters. Some reports say the man who lives with the woman in Christchurch is a natural healer. A 1-year-old baby was found alive several days ago, along with the bodies on a cliff edge in the Nosori Highlands, 32 kilometres from where their car was discovered. Fiji Times reporter Felix Chowdhury says there is a lot of speculation over the deaths.
There's so many questions as to how they were taken from the car park in Watulevu, whether they were taken from there or from somewhere else to the place that they were found, which is about 40 kilometers away. Also, the way the bodies were found as well. There's so many questions, so right now it's still being investigated. There's a lot more questions than answers.
Felix Chowdhury says post-mortems reveal they had ingested a substance. A genetic analysis of almost 500,000 people has concluded there is no single gay gene that determines a person's sexual orientation, a theory popularised in the 1990s. Research in Europe and the US found that while there is a genetic component, it accounts for between 8 and 25% of same-sex behaviour across the population. Zeke Stokes from the advocacy group GLAD says she isn't surprised by the study's findings.
LGBTQ identities and orientations are very complicated. There is no single thing that can be turned on or off a person who identifies as LGBTQ. So it really reinforces what we've known all along.
Gay activists are concerned the scientific evidence that genes play only a partial role in sexual orientation could embolden people who insist being gay is a choice and who advocate tactics such as conversion therapy. The defence has called its own expert witness in the trial of a man accused of murdering a Mangawhai toddler. Aaron Archer is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty to murdering his former girlfriend's daughter, Aria Roberts, last August. The 2-year-old died of a blunt force head injury and a post-mortem later identified more than 20 bruises to her body. The Crown has said some injuries remain unexplained. Today, David Garravin, a forensic pathologist in Miami, said the injuries could be explained by the girl hitting her head while being swung around.
All I can do is offer an opinion whether the narrative you're offering me is reasonable or unreasonable, and in this case, it's reasonable.
Dr. David Garravin. People in Kiribati are making urgent preparations for what is predicted to be a record king tide tomorrow morning. The Kiribati Climate Action Network's national coordinator, Pelenise Alofa, says vulnerable communities on Tarawa have been building up seawalls in readiness for the inundation. Today's high tide encroached 100 metres inland, seeping into water wells, destroying plants and causing flooding. Tomorrow morning's king tide is predicted to be worse and will peak at 5 a.m. local time on Tarawa, home to half the country's 116,000 people. It's 5:05. The All Blacks lock Brodie Retallick says the dislocated shoulder he suffered against the Springboks last month was the most painful injury of his 77 Test career. Despite still recovering from the injury, he has been named in the Rugby World Cup squad, although coach Steve Hansen doesn't expect Retallick to be fit before the quarterfinals. Retallick says it was only a couple of days before the squad was named on Wednesday that he was confident he'd be able to make it.
Probably the sorest thing I've had happen to me on the rugby field. I had a feeling that it was out of place, and I think I actually went into a little bit of shock and scared Anton. I got up off the back of the ruck and ran straight into him and said some words I probably shouldn't repeat, and he looked at me with the big wide eyes. So.
Brodie Retallick. The New Zealand doubles specialist Michael Venus has made a successful start to the US Tennis Open in New York. He and Chinese Taipei's Hao Qingchan, the top seeds, won their mixed doubles first round match 7-6, 7-6. Venus is scheduled to play the opening round of the men's doubles tomorrow with his playing partner Raven Klaasen of South Africa. Fellow Kiwis Marcus Daniel and Artem Sitak are also yet to play their first round matches in the men's doubles with their respective partners. The Warriors have missed out on Fijian international Api Koroisau. The Manly hooker has signed with the Penrith Panthers for the next 3 National Rugby League seasons. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the cows really are coming home on Country Life to a sanctuary in North Canterbury where 19-year-old Jasmine Hubber grazes nearly 200 bovines she's rescued from the meat trade. Rev Fountain is our Friday night live act, and because this week's element is Rutherfordium, we have a sonic tonic dedicated to splitting things from the apple to the atom. That's Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, scattered showers gradually clearing tomorrow. Auckland and Coromandel, partly cloudy, isolated showers at first, rain tonight, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Waikato to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui, mostly cloudy today, isolated showers turning to rain for a time, becoming fine early tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, partly cloudy with patchy rain tonight, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha. Mostly fine. Cloud and isolated showers north of Kapiti clearing this evening, and areas of cloud in Otago tomorrow morning. For Bulla and Westland, long fine spells, the odd shower near the coast. Fiordland showers easing tomorrow. Southland and Clutha mainly fine, but a few showers and strong westerlies in the south. And Chatham Islands, a few showers. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, the numbers. 914 measles cases around the country, 762 of them in Auckland. Scrapped the New Zealand Secondary Schools Rugby League Championship in case its players get or spread measles. Activated today, the National Health Coordination Centre to coordinate the response to the outbreak in Auckland and monitor the situation elsewhere. The fear? The outbreak will worsen, and there's the possibility it could be fuelled by thousands of secondary students gathering across New Zealand for winter sports tournament week on Monday. Andrew McRae reports.
The National Championships was due to start on Monday in South Auckland, which is home to more than 500 of Auckland's measles cases. Teams were due to come from around the country, and New Zealand Rugby League's Wellbeing General Manager Nigel Vangana says it was too risky to go ahead.
I'd say there'd be a lot of disappointed kids out there missing out on this opportunity, but unfortunately it was out of our hands and one that we sort of had to do for the people of the country, really. So we didn't want teams travelling up from the South Island, potentially getting crook or one of them getting crook and taking it back down there.
The measles outbreak has been on everyone's mind ahead of the winter sports tournament week, which starts on Monday. That was scheduled to involve 79 secondary sports championships with more than 20,000 students across New Zealand. The Chief Executive of School Sport New Zealand is Gary Carnahan.
We have discussed with a number of schools who are saying that they have a number of non-immunised students that might make their team non-viable, and so they'll be considering their positions individually around that.
At Rowandale School in Manarewa, South Auckland, 170 of its 600 students have been away as there was doubt over their vaccination status. One staff member is off work with the disease. Assistant Principal Lois Hawley-Simmons says information from Public Health has until this week been sadly lacking.
We had our individual teachers contacting their own immediate medical centres and getting different stories.
She says closing all schools in Auckland for a period could be an option worth considering.
Would it help? I don't know, to be honest, but we have to consider almost all options before that comes to that decision.
Lois Hawley-Simmons says her school is in self-imposed isolation.
We had the sign up, we had the big sign out at the front of the school on our board. Please note that we are asking our agencies not to come in if you're not immunised or as a precaution.
The Auckland Regional Public Health Service says anyone with any symptoms of measles, including a cough or runny nose, should not be included in teams. And it says schools should request proof of vaccination for any student and parents under the age of 50 who are travelling with them. At the domestic terminal at Auckland Airport, most people say they're aware of the measles outbreak in the city. T. Longman's travelling with her husband and young daughter back to Tauranga.
Yes, very worried. That's why we're sitting outside.
Have you all been immunised?
Yeah, we have been. Not the baby, no. She's only 9 months, so she's too young to have her first shot.
Pregnant mum Jazz Kupu says she's more worried about herself than her 2-year-old daughter that she's travelling with.
I'm not immunised, but yes, my daughter is, yeah. So she's safe, I'm not.
And why is that?
Because me and my kids in my stomach now can catch it if we actually do come in contact with it, yeah. And we could get seriously sick.
Around the country, the number of reported cases of measles varies from 4 in the southern DHB area, 41 in Canterbury, 26 in Northland and 3 in Waikato. The Waikato Medical Officer of Health, Richard Hoskins, says because of the close proximity to Auckland, it's inevitable the number in his region will rise.
The longer it goes on in Auckland, the more likely we are to get more cases. And then, of course, we've got unvaccinated people in our community, so the cases we've already got could be passing it on to other people.
The National Opposition wants to see more resources to tackle the worst measles outbreak in more than 20 years. Its Associate Health spokesperson, Dr. Shane Reti, says the country has taken its eye off the ball when it comes to the seriousness of infectious diseases.
I'm pleased that we're starting to take the vaccination service out to the people. I think it can go further, and so I'd like to be seeing more resource applied to this. Not clear to me that we've reached the peak in this outbreak at this point.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the rollout of additional nurses to provide more measles vaccinations will help.
My strong advice to anyone is make sure that you're vaccinated, make sure that you're not relying on simply not having contact. The smartest, safest thing to do is to be vaccinated.
Tomorrow in Auckland, vaccination clinics will be set up in Manukau, the Clendon Shopping Centre in Manarewa, and at the Free Church of Tonga in Mangere. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Organisers of a massive school sports tournament are apparently powerless to ban hundreds of unimmunised students attending despite the measles outbreak. In little over a week, 11,500 intermediate students from more than 365 schools in New Zealand, Asia and the Pacific will descend on the Bay of Plenty for the AIMS Games, where they'll compete in 23 sports. Students with measles must stay away, and unimmunised students who have been exposed to measles are being asked not to attend either. But students who haven't had their vaccinations or don't know about their immunity is more of a grey area. AIMS tournament chair Hank Popping, who is also the principal of Tauranga's Otumotai Intermediate, says since July they have been working closely with health officials to minimise the risk.
This year, for the first time, we've asked all competitors and their families to give us medical information, so in case of an accident or sickness. So we actually know how many students are coming to the AIMS Games who are not immunised.
How many is there?
There are 800.
800 unimmunised.
Or they don't know. So we're now going back to each school, and we know exactly which students are in the schools that aren't immunised or are unsure, and asking those schools to contact those families and make sure that they're safe.
So, are you going to ban any unimmunised players, or what have you decided?
The advice we've been given by the health authorities is that, and the advice that's on our website and through the letters is that students with measles are not allowed to attend the AIMS Games or anyone who's been in contact with measles. Students who are not immunised, we're saying to them that if they've been in contact with anyone with measles, they're not to come to the AIMS Games.
The problem with that, though, isn't it, Hank, is that they might not know if they've been exposed to measles and they're unimmunised and at risk.
That's correct. They are at risk, and that's why we're contacting every school to contact their parents and just alert them to that fact. In our case, for example, we've got 6 students who we know haven't been immunised, so we're contacting their families, talking about the risk and suggesting that they shouldn't be in places where there will be lots of other students. For example, the opening ceremony.
So it sounds like you're basically leaving the ultimate decision about these students' participation up to the school. Would that be fair? If they are unimmunised?
We're asking every school to look very closely at the recommendations that the health authorities have given. And so, as I said, we're saying to them that no one with measles or in contact with measles is allowed to come. And anyone who's not immunised, talk to the families and make sure they know the risk. And if they think that they've been in contact with measles or are worried, then they shouldn't come.
That still sort of leaves a lot of ifs and buts, really, doesn't it? So why not just call it and say, OK, to play in this tournament, you have to be immunised. We need to know you're immunised, or, sorry, you can't be here. Why not just do it that way?
Unfortunately, I don't think we can, because of mainly because of the fact that families still have a choice of immunising or not.
Mm.
We can give that strong advice, and we can say, look, this is our recommendations. Your child's not immunised; they could be at risk. So you need to make sure you do something about it.
So your hands are tied. You don't think that you're legally able to ban them? Is that the situation?
I don't think we can, no.
Would it be your preference to ban them if you could?
I guess if we could, we would do that. Unfortunately, we don't think we can. And so we're giving the strongest advice to those families as we can through their schools, and asking the schools to make sure that they are contacting every one of their students who are in that position.
I'm picking this leaves you in a pretty difficult position, does it?
It does. But what we do know is that there are 100 schools coming from Auckland, for example. So we're paying particular attention to those schools from Auckland, particularly the areas that they're coming from, and working with the public health authorities in Auckland and also here.
Are you going to have public health officials on the ground during the tournament?
Yes, we are, and we're what we are doing. I'm just trying to find out what we have arranged with the public health authorities is to have medical people on the grounds. We're also talking to all the medical centres and with schools. So if someone suddenly starts to show any signs of measles, we will quickly act with our medical authorities here and arrange for them to be seen quickly.
So what happens if you do get cases while the tournament is on? What happens? Do you have to shut up shop, or you must have a kind of emergency plan as such?
We do, and as part of all our health and safety plan, because obviously the health and safety of all our students is top of our list. So if, for example, a person is found to have measles at the AIMS Games, then we will look closely at shutting down that side of the AIMS Games or warning people that there has been a case at the AIMS Games.
So you may, if you do have a case, have to say, oh, well, that person was playing an XYZ sport. We need to shut that down, but carry on with some others activities.
We would take it case by case, and where were they performing? For example, if it was an individual playing golf, that'd be a different situation to someone who's in a team. And so we would take it case by case.
Was any consideration given to not holding the AIMS Games because of the measles outbreak?
We've obviously considered it, but we believe that we are doing everything we can, to make sure that everyone still has a tournament and everyone is still healthy and safe as part of that.
Have you required the same standard of the coaches and the referees and people who might be volunteers helping set things up, etc.? Have you required them all to produce evidence of immunisation?
We haven't at this stage, not with the adults, but it's certainly something we're going to be following up on. Our first priority are the students, because they're the ones who are going to be in the closest proximity, but then we're looking at the volunteers and everyone else that's coming as well.
I suppose there's also an unknown quantity here, which is the spectators. You have no control over them, do you?
No, we don't.
What?
And again, so that's going to be a challenge as well.
So what risks does that pose, and how can you possibly manage that?
Well, it's going to be very difficult. The best we can do is go back to the schools and say, you need to make sure that all your processes are in place, that you're absolutely certain that whoever you are sending from your community is not going to put the rest of the AIMS Games at risk.
Does any of this make you nervous, Hank?
Well, it does. It does make us not so much nervous. It's just that it's a challenge that we have to face. As a trust, to make sure the AIMS Games is a healthy and safe event that everyone can still enjoy, but that we minimise the risk for all those students, and adults who have not been immunised.
And so that's Hank Popping, who is the chair of the AIMS Games there. We're already getting feedback from you on this. And some of you think that the Games should be put on hold. This one just close competition, irresponsible to carry on, don't hold the Games. Another person says cancel the Games, simple, this is not funny. And a third one along the same vein, isn't allowing unvaccinated children at the Games a health and safety risk. But Nikki from Christchurch says, please stop exaggerating the measles outbreak. Most of the 800 or so cases will have run their course and be back to good health by now. I am not an anti-vaxxer, just a person who expects the truth to be reported by the media and not over-emotional bordering onto hysteria. Thanks for your feedback. Do get in touch. You can reach us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I'm interested in what you think of that. Should these large school sports tournaments be going on at a time where we do have a measles outbreak? Should unimmunised children be allowed to attend? Whose call should it be? I'm also wanting to know, do you know if you're vaccinated or immune? Do get in touch. It is 22 minutes past 5. Some Canterbury homeowners are worried that missed earthquake damage to concrete slabs could result in another big bill for the taxpayer. This comes only weeks after EQC told Checkpoint that the cost of misscoped damage or defective repairs following the Canterbury earthquakes could cost up to $1 billion. This includes $450 million for botched repairs, including badly repaired rubble ring foundations, and $300 million for an ex gratia payment to about 1,000 overcap on-sold homeowners. But some Canterbury homeowners who bought after the earthquakes and did do their due diligence are only discovering damage to their concrete slab foundations now. Logan Church reports.
Tracy Glass hoped her 320 square metre West Mountain home, purchased in 2014, would have escaped lasting earthquake damage being out of the city.
Our perception at the time was that the West Mountain area was relatively unscathed post-earthquake.
Tracy got a building report prior to moving in. It said there was nothing wrong with the concrete slab foundation other than some minor cracking in the internal garage. Everything was fine until she went to renovate her ensuite in June this year.
We were contemplating maybe trying to sell this coming spring decided to freshen up the ensuite. The floor layer, or the person laying the flooring, came in, pulled up the existing flooring, and at that time the cracks in the foundation were discovered.
The cracks spread over the floor like a spider web, some clearly wide and deep. Part of the slab under the shower has collapsed. Cracks were also discovered down the hallway in a bedroom wardrobe. The claim has been reopened with EQC, and Tracy's getting the slab properly assessed in the meantime. But it wasn't highlighted on the initial scope, as it simply couldn't be seen.
They would have no way of knowing what was under the flooring. There was no moving, cracking in the jib or the exterior blockwork or paths. So to the naked eye, you would perceive that the rest of the house was fine.
The house is livable, but Tracy is concerned about what it means longer term, both in terms of the house's ability to cope with any future quakes and its resale value.
From the point of view that if you're selling property and the full disclosure that you have to make, it would seem obvious that somebody wanting to buy this house would know about the damage in the ensuite. They would therefore say, well, what's under the rest of the, what other damage could there be? So we've decided that we're going to find out what the damage is. We're not dealing with a failed fix, we're dealing with an unknown fix, and it won't be until people replace flooring and do that sort of thing that those sort of issues will be revealed.
South of Christchurch in Rolleston, Bradley and Chris have found themselves in a similar boat.
We bought the house in 2014. All the EQC work had been signed off. It was all done under the due diligence when we purchased the house. So we moved in here assuming everything was fine.
They went to renovate in 2016 and found that a crack in the slab had been epoxy filled in the living room. But repairs stop at the point where the floor transitions to the kitchen.
It wasn't until we removed the old kitchen and started pulling the carpet up that we noticed that there'd been repairs under the carpet. It was about a year after we did the kitchen we realised that the crack actually carries through into the bathrooms, and so the crack carries on through there. So there's repairs up into the kitchen, no repairs under the kitchen, and then repairs again under the hallway and not in the bathrooms.
They too have gone back to EQC and are working through their next steps. The house, just like Tracy's, is perfectly livable, but
our concerns are that in the next 10 years the house could subside, it could crack further, it could affect the plumbing. There's a lot of concerns that it could become an issue long term.
Both of these houses have unreinforced concrete slabs, i.e. no steel mesh holding it all together. They were built in the 1990s or 2000s. This was before changes to the building code in August 2011 meant it was no longer possible to install an unreinforced concrete slab as a foundation. Checkpoint has spoken to several others with the same situation. But how many properties in Canterbury would fall into this category and could have damage? EQC couldn't supply us with the number of properties that they know of with missed concrete slab damage, saying it wasn't easily searchable. We tried another way, asking the Christchurch City Council and Selwyn District Council if they could tell us how many properties in their districts have concrete slab foundations. This information would be in individual building consent files. The Christchurch City Council says that data is not possible to get, while the Selwyn Council says they have it but can't collate it. But Christchurch carpet layer Mike Richards has seen this problem firsthand.
With a lot of uplifts and new carpets being done, I've found that a lot of slabs have had cracks that to me look like earthquake damage, and in one case it was at least 15 to 20 mils wide, and I couldn't feel, I put my ruler through the gap and it didn't hit anything, so the slab to me was completely broken.
Mr. Richards, who's been in this industry for almost 2 decades, says there could be a large number of homes with concrete slab foundations with undiscovered earthquake damage.
It would definitely be very large. I guess it depends on how old the houses are, because obviously everyone has the steel mesh in them now, so the slabs should be a lot stronger. But whether people were taking shortcuts, in the 90s, who knows? But it could range in the hundreds, could range in the thousands. You just wouldn't know unless you uplifted everything.
And the potential cost of that is unknown. We asked EQC and they didn't know. But Mike Richards says if homeowners discover cracking in their slab foundations that looks like earthquake damage, they should get in touch with EQC right away. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, turning pest seaweed into an edible expert. Scientists say there's no single gay gene, and life after the closure of the Manawatu Gorge. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Interested to know if you've found anything nasty in your concrete slab foundations in Christchurch. Do get in touch. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines with Susanna.
The government is activating a National Health Coordination Centre in response to the measles outbreak. The worst affected region is Auckland, with 762 confirmed cases this year. The Associate Health Minister Julianne Genter says the situation is extremely serious. She says the National Centre will work with Auckland's DHBs and Public Health Service to strengthen the response. This weekend, there will be vaccination clinics open in South Auckland, and that vaccination is free. A Fijian family of 5 who died in mysterious circumstances last weekend will be buried tomorrow, the day they were to be celebrating the birthdays of 2 of the children. Fijian authorities are interviewing 2 New Zealand residents, a man and a woman, in relation to the deaths of a Fijian couple, their daughter and her 2 daughters. It's reported post-mortems reveal they had ingested a substance. The man being interviewed is said to be a natural healer. The defence has called its own expert witness in the trial of a man accused of murdering a Mangawhai toddler. Aaron Archer is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty to murdering his former girlfriend's daughter, Aria Roberts, last August. The 2-year-old died of a blunt force head injury. The Crown says some injuries remain unexplained. Today, David Garravin, a forensic pathologist in Miami, said the injuries could be explained by the girl hitting her head while being swung around. The organisers of a major pro-democracy march planned for Hong Kong tomorrow have called it off after authorities denied them permission. It comes hours after the arrests of 2 leading members of the pro-democracy movement in the Chinese territory. The Transport Agency says there are travel delays north of Wellington, Plimmerton and Paikakariki. It says people should expect significant delays. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Happy Friday, everyone. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's business time now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. Consumer confidence has perked up.
A little bit. Just a little
I love
bit.
it.
A little bit. Okay, look, overall it's a few, I guess what is it? A couple of points better than it was last month. And last month it was not so good. And it's still just below its historical average. So I wouldn't say, wow, it's perked up a bit, but it was from a fairly low base, to be honest. And so as a result of that, we're not sure just which way the wind is blowing. However, consumers are a bit more upbeat about their prospects for spending money on a major appliance. And so they should be, because, of course, I mean, we've certainly been giving them enough messages to go spend, with Adrian Orr, the governor of the Reserve Bank, coming out, on a regular basis, pretty much saying, we want people to spend, and unprecedented access to deputy governors making the same message, that it's good time to spend. Interest rates are low. They're going to stay low for a really long time. Look, anything to stimulate the economy at this point.
So we also have heard today that building permits are up. Where is that growth coming from?
Interesting. Yeah. So we hit a near 45-year high, yes, in terms of actual numbers. So we got 35,500 new homes were consented in the July month. Now, that's the highest since the end of 1975, and it's just shy of a record in 1974. Now remember what I'm saying here, 1975. In those days, there were a lot fewer of us than there are now. So when you look at the per capita number, and that's quite important, the number of consents are like 1 for every 138 people, compared with all those years ago when it was 1 for every 74 people.
And these are consents, obviously. We're also not looking at numbers for whether the houses went on and were built.
And a lot of them are for apartments, townhouses, and retirement village units. So they're not for homes like the way we used to think about a house with the quarter-acre section and that sort of thing. We're not talking about those kinds of properties today. We're talking about high density, yes, and also certainly not keeping pace with population growth. Yeah.
What else has been going on in the markets, Nona?
More interesting things to tell you about. Okay, so our market rose. This is the NZX Top 50 Index stock market. It rose 177 points. That's 1.7% to 10,757. Now, that's the 8th time this month we've had a movement of more than 1%, one or up or down. And that's partly because the trade talks between the United States and China appear to be back on the boil again. So who knows? Anything could happen. However, our New Zealand dollar dipped below 63 cents today to 62.98, just below 63 cents. That's the same lowest point we've had for about 4 years. But interestingly, the Australian dollar also fell against the US dollar to its lowest level in about a decade. So quite a big drop for the Australian currency. And of course, for the New Zealand currency was just a small drop, but it's sort of psychological. And where to from here? Nobody knows.
Not going to
just have to wait till next week.
You're not going to avail us with the British pounds, the pence.
You want the pence?
I feel that the English have been left out. What have you got for us, Nona?
Okay. So here we go. So 93.8 against the Australians. That's exactly where we were yesterday, and 51.7 British pence, which is exactly where we were yesterday. So I could have just left them off. Really, nothing changed.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Valsier with Business News, and you can check out RNZ Business Podcast 2 cents worth this week. Economists Kate Rayworth and Arthur Grimes go head-to-head over our reliance on GDP. Now, you can find that podcast at all the usual podcast apps or on the RNZ website under podcasts and series. A Coromandel company hopes to turn the gorse of the sea into the country's next big export industry. Wakame Fresh is receiving $75,000 from the government to investigate turning a type of pest seaweed into a commercial edible product for the international market. Our reporter Tom Furley went out on their boat today to see what it's all about.
Before you get to Coromandel town, roadside signs advertise fishing tackle and boating supplies, and local cafes boast of fresh fish, oysters, mussels and scallops. Residents dotted along the coast have long had a close connection to the sea and its traditional bounty, but Wakame Fresh are harvesting something else, seaweed.
This is the Undaria. It's relatively small in this location, but it does grow to 1.5 metres, that sort of length. This is the reproductive part up here, the sporophyll, which can be used for food and nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals. We then have the midrib, which is usable in food as well. But of course, at the moment, we're working with the stem for the Japanese consumers.
That's Lucas Evans. Alongside Lance Townsend, the pair began looking into harvesting Undaria, also known as wakame or the gorse of the sea, 7 years ago. Undaria is a pest and is now widespread across the eastern and southern coastlines of New Zealand after coming from Asia on board cargo ships in the 1980s. After jumping on the boat just outside of Coromandel town, it's not long before the pair pull up alongside lines of buoys and laden ropes are winched from the sea.
These are mussel lines, and this is an invasive species that was introduced into New Zealand waters. It's taken over policy up until I believe it was 2010. Meant that it wasn't able to be accessed, but of course changes have made it commercially viable viable to explore anyway.
Wakame Fresh has partnered with the local mussel industry, who traditionally have just cut away the seaweed as bycatch. Lucas Evans wants to harness that waste, and while the New Zealand market may be small, it's in hot demand in Japan, where it's a staple in things like salads or miso soup. On board today is the president of Japanese company Kataoka Corporation, Shoichiro Kataoka. They've partnered with the Coromandel harvesters and are considering a commercial contract for export. Here his words have been interpreted by a translator.
Japanese consumers use a lot of Undaria, but it's only 10% of the wakame consumed in Japan came from Japan within the country. And the rest, the 90% came from China and Korea. And given the high quality of New Zealand area, he believes that there's a huge market potential.
But it's still early days. While the company began exporting to Australia last year, it's still working out its feasibility for the larger Asian market. It's now been given $75,000 through the government's Sustainable Food and Fibre Futures Fund to study whether it is viable and establish New Zealand as a credible source of high-quality seaweed for the Japanese market. Its findings will then be shared with the wider New Zealand seaweed industry, which Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor hopes will kickstart investment.
This one, if proved to be successful, has huge implications, and we've done it in lots of other areas. We've turned a pest deer into an industry, taken manukit that was cut down on farms for many, many years now into a valuable asset. We take possum fur and turn it into a valuable asset. So once again, if we can do it with a pest like Undaria, then I guess we've got unlimited opportunities.
On board the boat, the seaweed is cut up and blanched in hot, then cold water, where it turns from a muddy brown to a bright green. A plate is passed around. The minister's verdict: no need to add salt.
Nice weed, I get rid of it.
For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing a mounting political and legal challenge to his efforts to shut down Parliament and force through a no-deal Brexit. Opponents, including some from his own Conservative Party, are increasingly confident that they have the numbers to block a no-deal outcome in the Commons. Mr Johnson has declared his intentions to step up the tempo in the hunt for a Brexit deal with the EU, revealing that UK officials will meet their counterparts in Brussels twice a week during September, while MPs are locked out of Westminster. But he's now confronted by a growing backlash to his political strategy, with more than 1.5 million voters signing a petition against the move. The BBC's political editor Laura Koonsberg has the latest.
Tempers hot, nerves frayed.
Over and over.
A member of the government and Tory MP in Cheltenham defending himself to protesters, but not entirely the government's approach.
I have made my position clear. I've spoken to the Chief Whip about it.
Time is short, but within days, swathes of MPs will try to remove the possibility that Boris Johnson could take us out of the EU without a deal. With even senior Tories on side, they'll try to change the law.
It may well be that next week is the only opportunity. I'm afraid it does look as if our options have now narrowed, and if Parliament is going to assert some control and say, well, OK, if we leave with no deal, but that has to have the consent of Parliament, then that would suggest that we need to move sooner rather than later.
Those who fear the possible turmoil of leaving without a deal seem more determined now. The Prime Minister's caused outrage. Protesters not just in Westminster and the West Country today, but in Norwich tonight. Boris Johnson's cut the number of days the Commons will have to scrutinise exactly what's going on. Frustration at that in Leeds and other cities too. The official line: it's totally routine for Parliament to have a breather, to be prorogued for that amount of time.
There is going to be lots of time to debate before the 31st of October. Parliament will be sitting then and will be able to have whatever motions it wants. I think the outrage is phony.
But to clip Boris Johnson's wings, to outlaw no deal, Tories, Lib Dems, the SNP all need to work together with Jeremy Corbyn to get the numbers for a majority next week.
What we're going to do is try to politically stop him on Tuesday with a parliamentary process in order to legislate to prevent a no-deal Brexit, and also to try and prevent him shutting down Parliament during this utterly crucial period. The implications for this country are very, very serious.
So just weeks into office, the new Prime Minister is up against protests around the country and many MPs in Parliament determined to try to defeat him next week. When they come to vote, the numbers might be achingly tight. But when it comes to Brexit, as ever, the difference of opinion vast indeed.
That was Laura Koonsberg reporting from London. It's about 17 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. There is no specific genetic signature for homosexuality, or in layperson's terms, no single so-called gay gene. That's the finding of the largest ever international study of human genetics and sexual preferences. Published today, the study has already come in for criticism, with some commentators saying it's of little value scientifically and could pose risks for members of the LGBT community. The ABC's Susanna Lyons reports.
Is it nurture or nature? When it comes to human sexuality, it's been a controversial question. And for scientist Dr. Fasa Theraponga Sasuti, it's also a deeply personal one.
We truly consider this a team scientific effort intended to help increase our collective understanding of the genetics of sexual behavior, which is actually a very, very personal topic for me as a scientist, but also as a gay man.
He's from the genetic testing company 23andMe, and he's one of the researchers behind a landmark study that scoured the human genome for DNA sequences that might be linked to our sexual preferences. The team compared the genomes of 470,000 people in genetic databases in the United States and the UK. They were looking for genetic markers shared by people who said they'd had same-sex intercourse, and they found 5 such markers, or small gene variations. But the scientists have concluded that they're unlikely to play a big role in sexual behaviour.
There is no single gay gene, but rather the contribution of many small genetic effects scattered across the genome.
Dr. Ben Neal from the Broad Institute in Massachusetts says while genetics play a role, they're only part of the story, and environmental factors are also important in shaping human sexual behaviour.
We also found that it's effectively impossible to predict an individual's sexual behavior from their genome. Genetics is less than half the story for sexual behavior, but it's still a very important contributing factor.
Published in the journal Science today, the study worries bioethicist Bridget Hare from the University of New South Wales, who questions whether this type of knowledge is worth the potential consequences.
I mean, currently there are more than 70 countries in the world that criminalise same-sex sexual practices, and in about 12 of them, the laws can in fact be used to put people to death for their sexuality.
Even though the study found you can't currently predict someone's sexual preferences from their genes, Dr. Hare fears a future where further studies might reveal a predictive DNA signature, which then could be used against LGBT people when travelling to countries where same-sex relationships are illegal.
I actually think that there are a million things in the world to research, and the genetics of same-sex sexual behaviour really isn't one that's screaming out for more work because of the dangers that it involves.
Bioethicist Bridget Hare from the University of New South Wales ending that report. 2 years after the closure of the Manawatu Gorge Road, residents in towns on both sides of the ranges say their quality of life and the local economy are suffering. It will be at least another 6 years before the new road will be ready. Our reporter Charlotte Cook and visual journalist Anna Tovey went to the Manawatu to speak with locals.
Birdsong has replaced the rumble of traffic on the road that for 145 years was the bustling connection between the Manawatu and Hawke's Bay. Abandoned since 2017 when a massive slip blocked the way, it is now only the guerrilla trampers who ignore the orange cones at the entranceway to brave the dilapidated track that was once the Manawatu Gorge Road. 6,000 vehicles a day are now diverted through the little town of Ashurst, missing the main road and heading straight down a residential street. Scott Groves has lived in Salisbury Street for 3 years, moving in just 3 months before the gorge closed permanently. He says it's turned his residential street into what feels like State Highway 1.
We went from a silent street to absolute chaos.
Scott Groves says he has to take sleeping pills to be able to get any rest at night, as the noise of trucks shakes the house like an earthquake.
We have a peak hour that starts at 6 a.m. with trucks going through till about 8 a.m. You cannot sleep between those times. In the evening, from about 5 o'clock till about 7 o'clock, you cannot listen to the news inside. Even with the TV turned up, the noise inside the house is that loud.
Mr. Groves, who has a disability, finds it's too dangerous to use his driveway as large logging trucks thunder past. He says the transport agency isn't listening and residents are facing at least another 6 years of this while the new road is built. Another Ashurst resident, Harvey Jones, can hear the rumbling of the trucks from his property 2 kilometres away. He says locals are fed up.
They'd like the traffic out of Ashurst because it's just, interrupting our peaceful nighttime. And we used to be able to hear native birds and moorpork at night, and now we can't because of all the traffic's going through.
And despite the increase in vehicles travelling through the area, Harvey Jones doesn't think it's provided much of a boost to local businesses.
Because they bypass the CBD area, they're mostly just going straight through and cutting round the edge of Ashurst itself through the residential area.
But while Ashurst businesses were never dependent on the gorge traffic to survive, over the hill in Woodville, the closure has been a huge blow. The Wind Farm Cafe has been on the main street of Woodville for more than a decade. Its owner, Tommy Lee, says they've survived numerous temporary and now permanent gorge closures by relying on local support. He says they've watched businesses come and go, but people are always hungry and need coffee.
There's absolutely a downturn in traffic, but even with less traffic and people still keen on food, they still come inside Woodville for just a cup of coffee or a cake and a pie, so that's not a big issue. But I do notice that there are less traffic compared to before.
Tararua District Councillor Shirley Hull says the first few years were quiet for Woodville, with multiple business closures, but now things are on the up.
I think people are hearing about what's coming next for Woodville, and that's the new road. So people are sort of quite charged by that, which is why we've got new businesses in town.
But some people aren't giving up. 91-year-old Noni Sanderlands hand-collected 863 signatures for his petition to save the gorge. He says the Saddle Road isn't well equipped to deal with the 6,000 vehicles driving it every day.
Of that, 2,000 are heavy trucks and 3,000 to 4,000 are cars using the roads every day.
While he is in support of the new road, he thinks the gorge should be opened for light traffic to relieve Ashurst of some of the strain.
Time will tell how successful it will be, but they have to wait another 5 or 6 years before it will ever be finished. And in that time, I think the cars only could go through the gorge if they will only open it. If they have the will to open it is the big thing.
The new road to Ahuaturanga is due to be finished in 2024. For Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
And if you were listening to that piece on your own drive home, you can check out Charlotte and Anna's visual piece on our webpage. It'll also go up on our Facebook page. Fiji police have been questioning a New Zealand resident in connection to the mysterious deaths of 5 family members in the Pacific Island nation. A couple, their daughter, and 2 granddaughters were found dead on Monday morning in steep terrain in the remote Nasuri Highlands, with police saying they ingested a substance. The sole survivor of the incident was a 1-year-old found crawling and crying at the scene. A candlelit vigil is being held tonight in Nandi, as Alex Perrottet reports.
Police say 63-year-old Nirmal Kumar, 54-year-old Usha Devi, their 34-year-old daughter Nileshni Kajal and her 2 daughters aged 11 and 8 years old died from a substance they ingested in the Nausori Highlands. Fiji Broadcasting Corporation reports the Fiji police were forced by a court decision to release the Christchurch couple after 48 hours as no charges had been laid, but they've been stopped from travelling back to New Zealand. Fiji Sun reporter Waisea Nasokia says he spoke to the first person on the scene, who was a man on horseback who heard a baby crying.
I think he was pretty scared to go through to the scene and pick up the girl in the first place, because he said he normally goes through that place often, but to hear a baby crying in such an isolated area, he thought that it was a ghost.
The man then called a nearby taxi driver to go with him down the steep hill to investigate the grisly scene. The baby was taken to hospital and her mother, a surviving daughter of the Kumars, flew home from her trip to Australia and is said to be devastated. Waisea Nasokia says autopsies have revealed the family members' bodies contained a poisonous substance.
According to the post-mortem, they said that they would have digested something, perhaps taken in something that seems poisonous. But they don't see any marks or any wounds.
Police are yet to release any more information about the substance, other than to say it's the same substance present in all the victims. They say further laboratory tests are being carried out. Waisea Nasokia says the Christchurch couple who were questioned are known to the family and have a house next door at Lenga Lenga in Nandi. Felix Chowdhury from the Fiji Times says police are still questioning the woman from Christchurch.
Because of the complicated nature of the deaths and the way the bodies were found, they have not given us any information to suggest whether it's a homicide or suicide. Right now, they are keeping their cards close to their chest because of the investigations and the nature of the way the bodies were found.
He says many people in the community have come forward to support the family, and a candlelit vigil is being held tonight in Nandi.
The family was actually preparing to celebrate the birthdays of one of the girls who died and the one-year-old baby. So the families that were preparing to gather here to celebrate the birthdays are actually gathering now to pay their final respects. And I think it's been a really big blow to the family.
The funeral will be held at Votulevo High School tomorrow while police continue their investigations. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
Tiny house owners are thinking big when it comes to protecting their tenancies and complying with building regulations. They say they're being tripped up by a tricky clause in the Tenancy Act, which excludes them from the rights of other land renters. It's the second piece of legislation that they'd like to see changed as they push for better recognition and fair treatment under the Building Act. Katie Todd reports.
A rental situation turned sour on the Kapiti coast taught tiny house owner Charla May she wasn't covered by the Tenancy Act. Her converted refrigerator truck sank into the land she'd rented, so the landowner dug out space for a driveway to stop it happening again. Realising she couldn't build the driveway on that part of the property, she tried to charge Ms May for filling the hole back in, first in lump sum and then by upping her rent by $500 a week. Ms May tried to tow her house away and ended up in a dramatic standoff with the landowner.
We ended up with the truck driver there and the police there and them refusing to move their vehicle from the driveway, which is the only access in and out of the property to pick up the tiny house. Because it's on private land, the police couldn't make them move their vehicle to allow access. So they were there quite a few hours trying to negotiate and get them to kind of see sense and let us remove it. So it took about another 6 hours.
Tenancy expert Scottney Williams says Section 5 of the Tenancy Act exempts mobile homes on bare land. Landowners renting to tiny house owners and tiny house owners who rent can't automatically use the Tenancy Tribunal, which means they have no easy way to resolve disputes when things turn ugly. However, Mr Williams says under Section 8 of the Act, the landlord and renter can opt into those rights if they have the foresight to write it into their tenancy agreement. Charla May is warning other tiny house owners to do that, but says ideally they'd be automatically included in the Act.
Well, it's no different to people in the rental market. You need rules and regulations to protect the renters and to protect the landowners. If you don't have legislation in place, then you're going to have more issues where people kind of flaunt it and take advantage of the loopholes and exploit people, especially people in vulnerable situations. I mean, I felt extremely vulnerable when I had my house on that land and I couldn't actually move it off there myself.
And that's something she's working towards with other tiny house owners who have banded together as the New Zealand Tiny House Association, sharing tips to negotiate muddy legal territory. They're also preparing a bill in a bid to ensure tiny house owners are treated more fairly and consistently under the Building Act, including a building code that caters for portable houses. Association spokesperson Nathan Orr thinks the first step will be defining just what a tiny house is.
At the moment, it can be anything from a yurt to a caravan to a house bus to a more conventional looking house but on wheels. How you actually add it to a piece of legislation without a definition, I'm not too sure.
Another founding member and tiny house maker, Rebecca Bartlett, has seen her clients operating under the table and sticking to friends and families' properties worried that current laws put them at risk of prosecution or mistreatment.
It does put fear out there, and they don't want to have problems. They want this as an alternative solution to getting ahead. They want to get off the rent trap. So, yeah, we definitely want to work with councils and government to have a solution for everybody.
Tiny houses may be portable, but Ms Bartlett says they're not going to disappear. So it's time New Zealand looked to follow overseas examples and put specific regulations in place. For Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd TNA.
And the Tiny House Association has its first South Island conference in Christchurch in October. Time for some feedback now on the interviews around measles, and there's a number of big sporting events coming up for school children. Kirsten's been in contact to say there's not been nearly enough information about the risk of catching and spreading measles by under 50-year-olds. My child and her friends are all attending AIMS Games Week, but no word from the school nor health board regarding the supporters needing to get immunised. Most parents don't realise that even though they may have been immunised as kids, they could need another shot now. Now, that's a reference to the so-called immunity gap. So if you are among that group, the recommendation is that you do check whether you need to get another vaccination. Also, free vaccinations are available from the following locations in South Auckland over the weekend. Free Church of Tonga in Mangere between 9 and 3. The Manawatu Super Clinic tomorrow from 8:30 till 3. And the Clendon Public Nursing Office, and that apparently is in the Clendon Shopping Centre at Manurewa.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. The government is activating a National Health Coordination Centre in response to the measles outbreak. There have been 762 confirmed cases of measles in the Auckland region so far. Speaking at a press conference in the last half hour, the Associate Health Minister Julianne Genter has said the situation is extremely serious.
This weekend, there will be new outreach centres. Counties Manukau have put out 3 outreach centres in South Auckland where people can go to get their free MMR vaccinations. The most important thing right now is for people to get vaccinated.
Julianne Genter says the outbreak will be a top priority for the Health Ministry in the coming days. She says an additional 57,000 MRR vaccines have been administered in the last 6 months, but there's no shortage. The Ministry of Health is warning people to make sure they're vaccinated against measles at least 2 weeks before they travel to Auckland. At Auckland Airport, T. Longman says she and her husband have been vaccinated, but not their young daughter.
We have been, not the baby, no. She's only 9 months, so she's too young to have her first shot. It's very worried. That's why we're sitting outside.
T. Longman, who was travelling with her family back to their home in Tauranga. The police have announced a pilot for handing over firearms at approved dealers in the government's buyback scheme. Hunting and Fishing Franklin and Gun City Penrose will accept banned firearms and parts on behalf of the police in the pilot being run in Auckland from September the 3rd till the 10th. Once the firearms have been handed in, they will be collected by the police, who will then contact the owners to discuss the condition of the firearms against the price list. The police will be on site at the dealerships at specific times for people who want a face-to-face assessment. Processing will take 10 working days. An Ashurst resident fed up with heavy traffic speeding down his residential street says he has to take sleeping pills because the trucks shake his house like an earthquake. Scott Groves moved into his house just 3 months before the gorge closed permanently 2 years ago, diverting 6,000 vehicles a day through the little town. A replacement road won't be built for another 6 years. He told Checkpoint the noise is horrendous.
6 a.m. with trucks going through till about 8 a.m. You cannot sleep between those times. In the evening, from about 5 o'clock till about 7 o'clock, you cannot listen to the news inside. The noise inside the house is that loud.
Scott Groves says he avoids using his driveway as it's too dangerous with large logging trucks racing past. 2 Fijian citizens with New Zealand residency are being interviewed in relation to the death of a family near Nandi last weekend. The police believe the man and woman both know the family, and local media report he is believed to be a natural healer. Charlotte Cook reports.
The bodies were found in the Nizuri Highlands several days ago near the edge of a cliff, 32 kilometres from where their car was discovered. Post-mortems show the 5 victims ingested a substance which led to their death. The bodies, including 2 children, were discovered on Monday. A 1-year-old was also found crawling at the scene. Fiji Times reporter Felix Chowdhury says the family will be buried tomorrow, on a day that was supposed to be a birthday celebration for 2 of the children. Fijian authorities are preventing the couple from returning to Christchurch. The Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade and the New Zealand Police say it's a matter for Fijian authorities. This is Charlotte Cook.
A man on trial accused of murdering a Mangawhai toddler has called his own expert witness. Aria Dawn Roberts died while in the care of her mother's former boyfriend, Aaron Archer, at Mangawhai last August. Mr Archer is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after the 2-year-old died of a blunt force head injury. The Crown says the 31-year-old assaulted Aria, while his defence maintains he was playing with the girl when she hit her head. Today, Dr David Garravin, a forensic pathologist in Miami, said the toddler's injuries could be explained by an accidental knock to the head. His evidence contrasts to that of the pathologist called by the Crown, who told the jury a single knock could explain some, but not all, of the injuries. The organisers of a major pro-democracy march planned for Hong Kong tomorrow have called it off after authorities denied permission to hold it. It's unclear if protesters will still gather for any unauthorised demonstration after the Civil Human Rights Front told its members to stay home. The announcement comes just hours after the arrests of 2 leading members of the pro-democracy movement in the territory. CNN's Paula Hancock is in Hong Kong.
What we've heard is that the police have decided to deny the right to have this protest. They have said that they're concerned with public safety and public order, so they've said that both a march and an assembly will be illegal. So this group has now said that they are not calling for their members to actually go out onto the streets because they can't guarantee their safety. Now, what that means is that we are likely to see less people on the streets tomorrow, but we're likely to see less families, less of the peaceful protesters. We could still see some other elements wanting to come out and make their voices heard.
Paula Hancock's reporting. It's 6:05. The injured All Blacks lock Brodie Retallick has set himself small goals to get through the early stages of the Rugby World Cup. Retallick hasn't played since dislocating his shoulder in New Zealand's draw with South Africa in Wellington late last month. The selectors have rolled the dice with Retallick, who isn't expected to be ready to play until the quarterfinals in Japan. He says he'll have to find ways to keep himself mentally fresh.
It'll be a little bit frustrating. I think like everyone works towards a goal each week, is getting there on Saturday and performing, and not being able to do that will be slightly different. I think I might go to AA and get the international driver's licence and jump in the kit van and try that around. But I also got some small goals to start ticking off to get back on the field, so just be working away at that.
Brodie Retallick. The Black Caps bowler Tim Southee says it's a tricky but not unfamiliar situation for them to go straight from Test to T20 cricket. After drawing their 2-match Test series 1-1, New Zealand and Sri Lanka play the first of 3 T20s in Kandy overnight on Sunday. Southee will captain the Black Caps during the series, with Kane Williamson returning home for a break. He says adapting to changes in format is just part of the international game.
Going from Test to T20s is a little bit different, a few changes, and obviously you've got to get in your Yorkers and your slow balls and your variations. But as I say, it's something that international cricketers, if you're playing all 3 formats, you have to get used to and have to adapt to.
Black Caps bowler Tim Southee. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Salman Rushdie on his new novel. Think Don Quixote in the midst of America's opioid epidemic. We're approaching a time when we can fake anyone saying or doing anything, or anyone caught doing or saying anything can claim it's fake. What can be done? And photographer and adventurer Craig Potton on his exploration of the Buddhist world. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, scattered showers gradually clearing tomorrow. Auckland and Coromandel, partly cloudy with isolated showers at first. Rain tonight, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Waikato to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui, mostly cloudy tonight with isolated showers turning to rain for a time, becoming fine early tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, partly cloudy with patchy rain tonight, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, all Also, Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha. Mostly fine, cloud and isolated showers north of Kapiti clearing this evening, and areas of cloud in Otago tomorrow morning. For Bulla and Westland, long fine spells and the odd shower near the coast. Fiordland, showers easing tomorrow. Southland and Clutha mainly fine, but a few showers and strong westerlies in the south. Chatham Islands, a few showers. RNZ National, it's 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Ministry of Health modelling suggests the measles outbreak has not reached its peak and could continue to worsen for some weeks. There are now 914 confirmed cases of the highly contagious disease nationwide. 762 of those are in Auckland. Organisers of the New Zealand Secondary Schools Rugby League Championships have pulled the pin on the tournament, saying they can't risk the health of players and spreading measles around the country. But the AIMS Games, that attracts about 11,500 intermediate age students, will still be going ahead in Bay of Plenty. Meanwhile, a series of vaccination clinics are being held in South Auckland this weekend. I asked Director of Public Health, Dr. Caroline McElnay, if the measles outbreak has got away on them.
Well, it's in a steep part of a curve, if you like. We always plot outbreaks using a curve, and we always have this period when you get a steep escalation of cases, and then it plateaus and comes down again, and so we're at that steep escalation of cases.
And how long do you anticipate that will last, that steep escalation?
Well, according to our modelling, and assuming that there's no sort of other things that happen, the model does show it coming to a peak, and that would be in the next couple of weeks. It could continue to increase, but then it would come down. That's what we've seen when we've had other outbreaks, but of course this is of concern because of the numbers of cases that we're seeing.
We have known that immunisation rates are not as good as they should be for a while now. So have health authorities in New Zealand done enough early enough?
We've known that we have the immunity gap in the older age groups, but for measles vaccine, the vaccine, the MMR vaccine, is one of the vaccines that's fully funded, and it's freely available through primary care. And we have at every opportunity put out messages for reminding people if they're non-immune to go and get vaccinated. And we've used any outbreak or any case that we've had, because we have had quite a number of cases coming into New Zealand over the last number of years.
But people aren't listening, are they?
Message.
They aren't listening.
That's what we're getting the feedback, certainly in Auckland at the moment, that there are, despite the high numbers of cases and despite the message, and also despite the huge amount of work that has actually been happening and the response that people have made by going and getting vaccinated, and we can see that from an increase in the vaccines, what we're discovering is actually we do need to look at providing something extra, that primary care is not going to be accessed by everyone, and that's what we're currently working with Counties Manukau to help them stand up some of those additional services so that people can access those in addition to what's available in primary care.
Do you need some kind of powers of compulsion here?
Well, we need to understand first what really are the reasons for people not having their children vaccinated. What we're hearing and what the research that we've done is saying that this is not about a requirement to force people. It's about helping people make that actually go from hearing the message to doing the doing, and that's about helping people have more access to services. So that's our current focus. The discussion about whether or not we should force people to be vaccinated is certainly something that needs to be discussed. But at the moment, what we're very focused on doing is providing those extra opportunities for people and really continuing to encourage people to get vaccinated.
We've got a number of significant sporting events coming up over the next couple of weeks involving school students. Now, how worried are you about those?
Well, we're always worried about any large-scale public gatherings from an infectious disease perspective, because it can be an opportunity if someone is infectious for that organism to be spread. So we're certainly very concerned. We have given advice, we, the ministry, as well as the local public health units, have given advice to the organisers of those events. That's been happening for some time, so parents have already been given that information.
Have you considered shutting some of those sporting events down?
That's always part of any consideration when you look at strategies that you might need to adopt. We're not at that stage yet of recommending or suggesting that those events would be shut down.
What would it take? What would it take to close one of them down? What's the tipping point?
I guess it all depends on the nature of the event. The key thing for these events is making sure that people who are not ill, making sure that those people don't attend those events. The tipping point for shutting them down will have to be a mixture of how many more cases of measles that we get across New Zealand. It's always something that's a potential to be on the cards, but you have to balance whether it's going to make a difference in terms of the measles outbreak that we're currently facing.
So I've been speaking to organisers from the AIMS Games, and they say they don't have the power to ban students from the tournament who are unimmunised. Do you, as health authorities, do you have the power to ban unimmunised children from these sporting events?
Well, we've been speaking to the organisers of the tournament as well. We don't have the power to ban unimmunised students. There's certainly, at a local level, medical officers of health can require people who are infectious not to attend public events, but we've provided a lot of support to the organisers so that they know what to look out for, and to be very clear that if there are any students or attendees at the events who show symptoms, that they manage that very well and very quickly.
So to be clear, you can ask people or compel people to stay away if they are infected, and as I understand it, if they know they have been exposed to infection and they are unimmunised, that's the group of people you can ask to stay away or effectively ban.
Yes, we have to have a lot of evidence that they have the potential to spread disease, and those are the groups that we would focus on: those who are unwell or those who are unimmunised and who have been in contact with a case of measles. So they've got that potential to be infectious before they themselves become a case. So at a medical officer of health level, there are existing powers that allow you to exclude those individuals from an event. So it's rather than cancelling the event, it's about preventing some individuals from going to that event. The games themselves are not a risk if there's no one there who's infectious. So the focus for those games has been the students who are in Auckland, and that's where Auckland Regional Public Health has been working with those schools, particularly the schools where there have been cases, to give that advice as to which students should not travel.
And that's the Director of Public Health, Dr. Caroline McElnay. The Brazilian government has temporarily banned the lighting of fires for land clearing as it grapples with a dramatic increase in devastating blazes in the Amazon rainforest. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has faced intense international criticism for his failure to act on the fires, but environmentalists say his latest move is largely symbolic and the fires could still worsen. The ABC's James Glenday reports.
In the Amazon, the Manoki tribe dance and chant to ask their ancestors to protect the rainforest surrounding them and the animals that sustain their way of life. Many are on edge as fires burn nearby. Leader Manuel Kabushi believes one person is to blame: Brazil's right-wing president, Jair Bolsonaro. He wants to destroy our way of life, he says. That's why we're worried. It seems only Indigenous people will protect nature, and the white population or the government will not protect the Amazon, which is our lungs, our way of life. Mr. Bolsonaro has decried the amount of land Amazon tribes have access to, and one office last year campaigning to open up the rainforest to development, with more mines, highways and hydroelectric projects. He also has strong support from the country's large cattle industry, which is thought to be responsible for the vast majority of deforestation in the area. Felled trees and vegetation is often burned during the region's dry season to finish clearing land. But this year's season is thought to be the most intense in a decade. Some 27,000 blazes have been detected this month, and many believe cattle farmers have been emboldened by the president's rhetoric.
I'm very concerned at the moment. I think we have to take this extremely seriously. We've lost almost 20% of the Amazon already.
Alexander Antonelli is a Brazilian environmental scientist.
Around 20 to 25% is the tipping point after which the Amazon could convert into savanna.
Amid growing criticism at home and abroad, President Bolsonaro has signed a decree ordering a 60-day ban on legal land-clearing fires. It's unclear what that will actually achieve. Brazil has strict environmental laws, and most Amazon forest clearing is illegal. It's just the enforcement that's lax. But the country's foreign minister, Ernesto Araújo, claims some of the international criticism of Brazil is unfair.
We
want people to look at the data, he says, to compare the data for the fires this year with that of the past 20. We're actually a little below average. We're making an effort that has never been done before. South American leaders are expected to meet next week to discuss the crisis, while environmentalists are warning the situation could get worse. The Manawatu are simply urging the world to keep up pressure on the Brazilian government so the destruction in the Amazon can be stopped before it's too late.
James Glenday with that report. It is almost 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Dozens of protesters in Indonesia's Papua continue to occupy the governor's office after violent protests rocked Jayapura. Several government buildings in the provincial capital were torched on Thursday as thousands took part in anti-racism rallies. Mackenzie Smith reports.
On Thursday, just a day after clashing police and protesters in West Papua killed 3, the region's biggest city burned. Several government buildings, including the parliament, were set ablaze, the latest in unrest taking place across Papua for the past 2 weeks. Witnesses and state media say police fired tear gas at demonstrators who were rallying for an independence vote and an end to racism. Thursday's rally ended with protesters camping outside Papua Governor Lukas Nmba's office. Among them was the spokesperson for the pro-independence West Papua National Committee, Victor Yamor.
People of West Papua, they occupy the office of the governor of Papua, and people of West Papua, they demand referendum for independence.
Indonesia has struggled to contain what experts say are the largest protests to take place in Papua. Since last week, the government has blocked internet across the region to stop misinformation, and some phone lines have been disrupted too. That's made verifying the facts difficult, especially in Dayai Regency, where activists claim at least 6 protesters died in a clash with police on Wednesday. The government disputes this, saying only 2 protesters and a soldier died. A West Papuan activist in Jayapura, Rosa Moiwand, says security forces have been violent when dealing with protesters.
They shot the tear gas to us, and I managed to escape before the second attack. And then many of our friends, the marchers, last night they stayed there, fully disciplined, stay and not responding to the police.
Papuan news outlet tabloid Jubi reports 15 demonstrators were shot by rubber bullets in Jayapura on Thursday. Ms Moiwand says a heightened security presence is angering protesters. But struggling to contain the demonstrations, Jakarta flew in 600 extra soldiers to the city overnight. The state news agency Antara reports the deployment came as President Joko Widodo appealed for calm. An Indonesian researcher at the Mathenis Academy in Jakarta, Hippolytos Wange, says the unrest in Papua is unprecedented.
This is really something new. Over 57 years, there is no such protest like this. This is really massive in terms of the numbers and in terms of the pattern of violence.
Mr. Wange says the government's response shows it hasn't worked out how to solve the issue of Papua. But in a move likely to curry favour with some demonstrators, on Thursday police slapped travel bans on 7 people who hurled racist insults at Papuan students. The incident, which took place in the Javanese city of Surabaya earlier this month, is viewed as the catalyst for the protests. For Checkpoint, Mackenzie Smith.
The New Zealand All Blacks embark on mission near impossible this weekend with the Basketball World Cup in China. 5 years on from the last World Cup, the tournament has a whole new format with 32 teams split across 8 groups vying for the title compared to 24 in 2014. And as Matt Chatterton reports, making it out of the group stage will be hard enough for the All Blacks.
Performing the haka to a USA side stacked with NBA superstars and playing said team was a highlight for the All Blacks at the 2014 Basketball World Cup. They won't see any of those big names like James Harden or Steph Curry this time round though. USA have decided to send an understrength side to this year's tournament. So it turns out Steven Adams isn't the only one to choose the NBA over the World Cup. The All Blacks will, however, face stiff competition in their pool. They'll play 12th ranked Brazil, 28th ranked Montenegro and Greece, ranked 8th. All Blacks coach Paul Henare knows his side, ranked 38th in the world, is up against it.
But there have been many high-level teams, quality teams that have gone into tournaments with high expectations and fallen well short. So for us, we've got to keep it pretty short-sighted. We're just going to focus on each game that we have, try and do the best that we can in each of those games and focus on the opposition that's in front of us and whatever happens in the tournament will happen.
While optimistic, Henare remains realistic about his side's chances and is banking on solid preparation to get his side to the knockout stages. All Blacks power forward Finn Delaney, playing in his first World Cup, is confident, however, the side has the talent to pull off a few upsets.
I think everyone in our team, players and coaches, have belief that we can go and do something like that. Of course, we wouldn't be here if we didn't believe that. It wouldn't be fair to the people that have had sacrificed for us to be here if we didn't believe that. And I think we do wholeheartedly. So it's just exciting and a really cool opportunity for us to be able to go on and chase that.
For the All Blacks to have any chance of going deep into the tournament, the whole team will need to step up, particularly their leaders. With captains Mika Vakona and Ruben Tarangi ruled out with injury, the likes of Corey Webster, Tom Abercrombie and Alex Pledger will be called on to lead from the front. Webster, playing in his 3rd World Cup, skipped the recent New Zealand Basketball League season to prepare himself for the tournament. He says it was the best decision he could have made.
Body feels great. I took that time to really rest and heal any little niggles that I have, and that was successful. So I'm feeling great mentally and physically right now and ready to go, and kind of got the itch to play basketball again. After playing for 6 or so years without a break, you kind of it's a struggle and kind of grinding it out every day. But now I've got that hunger back and that fire, so I'm ready to go.
That itch is just what coach Paul Henare is looking for from his team. Though Henare wouldn't admit he's looking any further beyond their first match against Brazil, a certain member of the Greek team has crept into the minds of his players.
High pick and roll, Giannis on the loose! Oh, he didn't! Oh my gosh.
Giannis Antetokounmpo, known as the Greek Freak, is the reigning NBA MVP and will be the biggest name at this year's tournament. Standing at 6'11" and 110 kgs, Antetokounmpo is a human highlight reel, and All Blacks swingman Tom Abercrombie admits facing the Greek Freak is an exciting prospect.
I've thought about guarding him and how to guard him and things, and I'm excited by the opportunity. I think one thing our coaches have always done, they're extremely well prepared, and I know that we'll throw some things at him that he might not have seen before, and hopefully try and take him out of his game, but obviously that's easier said than done. He is the NBA MVP and it's going to be a great challenge for us.
The Tall Blacks are hoping they won't have to rely on beating Greece to make it to the knockout stages of the tournament, given the threat they possess with Antetokounmpo at the helm. If the team manages to pull off at least 2 wins in a group stage they are the lowest ranked side in, then they'll likely qualify for the knockout stage. Otherwise, they'll play off in the grading matches that go towards qualification for next year's Olympics. The Tall Blacks' first match is against Brazil on Sunday night. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
Before we go, let's get to some more of your feedback on the measles story. This person's been in contact to say, I have been at the coalface these last weeks seeing dozens of measles cases. The public, including the event organisers, are naive if they think they can manage measles. A single case will rip through vulnerable adults and children, and they won't even know they have been exposed until they get sick a week later. Sarah from Wellington writes, please Lisa, the measles outbreak is not the fault of the health authorities in our country. It is the fault of people who choose not to immunise themselves and their children, even when they're able to do so. We need the media to support the efforts of our doctors and researchers in debunking the myths of vaccination harm, not blaming the health professionals when the epidemic they warned about time and again becomes a reality. And this one says, unimmunised students at my child's school had to stay home during a measles outbreak. How is this different legally to banning unimmunised children from the AIMS Games? It seems like unnecessary hand-wringing by the organisers. Parents who choose not to immunise understand their child may face exclusion during measles outbreaks. Thank you so much for all your feedback this evening. Don't forget that you can go online onto our webpage or Facebook page and check out our stories, especially some of our visual stories today. We will be back next Monday. Do have a wonderful weekend and thanks for your company.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government is activating a National Health Coordination Centre in response to the measles outbreak, the worst in 22 years. The police have announced a pilot for handing over firearms at approved dealers in the buyback scheme. The organisers of a major pro-democracy march planned for Hong Kong tomorrow have called it off after authorities denied permission to hold it. And an analysis of almost 500,000 people has concluded there's no gene that determines a person's sexual orientation. Those are the headlines. Our next news at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
There's an outcome that says that children and young people are loved, safe and nurtured.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
The House ultimately controls its own membership. It's entirely possible for the House to expel the Prime Minister from the House.
Live with local, national and international